Hi everyone. So I have a lot of material to cover here with you guys. This is my response to the questions that were posted about major paper number 1. So I've compiled and tried to condense some of the questions down, and I'm going to present this to you here in a video, but I'll also have a link to this as a PDF and as a PowerPoint if you want to take your time and click through the answers, or if you want to scroll quickly to whichever question and answer set. Hopefully I will answer all of your questions. If I miss anything, let me know. I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible, but we do have a lot of content to cover here. So we'll try and make it quick and painless. Alright, we had several sets of questions that were related, so I've broken these down into categories. First category, questions on length of the paper. Paper should be between 3 to 4 pages. You can go longer than that if you need to. I do not suggest going longer than 5 pages. You can pull the brakes right there and be done. You should have more than enough material to get to that 3 to 4 pages by your final draft. And I do have our class set up to write in stages. So that means that your first rough draft, you only have to have 1 to 2, maybe 3 pages for that particular peer review assignment that's upcoming. By the second peer review, you should have your 3 to 4 pages so that you're more prepared to hand in that final draft at the full length required. So we'll draft a little bit, we'll pause, revise, rebuild, build, add, subtract if necessary, get to that longer length, submit for peer review, go through that process again. So you'll see that the rough draft page length requirement usually will differ, and it will build so that you're not trying to do everything all at once. That said, if you do have the full length, you're just really into writing this paper, and you get to the 3 to 4 pages naturally before the first rough draft, submit what you've got. The more you have, the better review process you're going to have. You're going to get more involved feedback. Okay. Other questions on length, please don't hesitate to ask. Submission standards are always going to be with the assignment, so that means what kind of files I accept. No Google Docs, no SharePoint, Doc, DocX, RTF, PDF files. Okay. Alright, questions on peer review. This was a bulk of the questions. So again, I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly, as a lot of this will cover more specifically when we get to the peer review assignments, which we have a little bit of time before we hit those. Okay, so what if my work goes to the 2 peer review sessions, but I want to have somebody else look at it? Who can do that? Do these need to be MLA style, etc.? Let's go through some answers. Okay, so first I'll talk a little bit about what the peer review process looks like. I do have our paper set for 2 peer review sessions. In each peer review session, you will submit your rough draft by the due date. After that due date, Canvas will automatically assign you the drafts of 3 peers that have also been submitted. Okay, you then have 48 hours before the assignment closes to go through and give those 3 peers feedback on their paper. And that includes marking up the paper and providing at least 1 comment. And you had some practice doing this already using the Canvas tools for our writing exercise assignment where you're doing your annotation. Okay, so you've had a little bit of practice already doing what you need to do and using those tools. Excuse me. Okay, length requirement for drafts, we've already talked about that. There is an expectation that you're going to meet that minimal length requirement, but we do build in stages. Who can peer review your paper? Outside of class, you can have anybody you trust review your paper. That can be your mom, it can be your dad, your cousin, your roommate, a friend, somebody who's taken English 101 in the past. But I can't give you credit for doing those things. I can only give you credit within the context of our class. So I do grade the peer review sessions, so make sure that you go through and submit on time, review your peers' work, so that you can get points for those assignments. If you don't participate in peer review, you can receive up to nothing, right? If you submit a rough draft but you don't review other people's papers, or if you just don't submit your rough draft to the assignment. And those assignments are worth 20 points apiece, so do make sure that you're paying attention when those pop up and that you are following the timeline so that you receive the full points possible. Alright, let's see here, what else? Oh, important to note, we do have some options for outside review that can be helpful. We have the University Writing Center, which is a wonderful resource, and they do online consultations. We also have our Slack writing group that you can receive extra credit for attending on a weekly basis. So by all means, check into those options as you start writing your paper so that you can get some outside eyes and outside feedback on your work. Okay, and after review, I do have the expectation also that you're working on your paper, that you are taking into consideration what your peers have said to you. It doesn't mean that you have to make all of the changes that have been suggested, but do look at your paper critically through the commentary that you've received and revise, build, and work towards strengthening your paper and your writing. Okay, questions on sources and outside sources. First, what is an outside source? Good question, really good question. This is whenever you use information from outside of yourself within a paper. So an outside source can be a summary, a paraphrase, or a direct quote. And that summary, paraphrase, or direct quote can come from a book, it can come from a movie, it can come from a YouTube clip, it can come from a personal interview, it can come from a news article. So there are a variety of different forms that outside sources take. And whenever you pull from those sources and use them, it's considered an outside source in your paper. And those outside sources must be cited and documented. That means that we are telling the reader where it came from, basically within the text of our essay and on a separate list called a works cited page. Okay. Alright, you do need more than one outside source for this paper. Your text that you're rhetorically analyzing is one source, but you do need an additional outside source that relates either to your text or that gives insight into rhetoric and rhetorical analysis. And I've got a couple of sample papers that hopefully show what that can look like. So do make sure that you access the sample papers and look at how outside sources have been used there. Alright, reliability and credibility of outside sources in academic writing is a big deal. A couple of things to steer clear of. Wikipedia. Any source that you read through and realize this doesn't seem like they've done their research or that this source is particularly credible. A few sources that you can rely on, anything that you find through the university library. They have a really nice print section and selection. They also have a wonderful list of databases that you as a student pay to have access to, and those databases all present credible outside sources that you can integrate and use. Okay. Alright, questions on contacting me and my influence into this paper. Okay, by all means get in touch if and when you have questions. I'm here to help. That's part of my job as your professor, is to help guide you through this process of writing. If you have more to say than you know can be contained in an email, set up a Zoom appointment with me. Contact me, we'll hash out what times work best for both of us, and then we can sit down and chat kind of as face-to-face as the camera allows, so that we can answer questions. I don't have time to thoroughly review everybody's paper before a final paper is submitted. I do my best if you send me your paper to give you feedback. I can't guarantee that that'll get to you before the next review or before the final is due. So I am a resource, but I cannot give as detailed feedback as perhaps you might want. Which is why, again, the Writing Center and our Slack writing groups are really wonderful resources to help you toward that end. If you want more information on what we're doing for this paper, we've got lecture material too. We've got lecture notes this week on rhetorical analysis, but we'll have future notes on paragraphing, on thesis statements, on using outside sources and applying MLA style in order to cite and document those sources correctly. So we will have other material to get through, and if you read through some of these lecture notes and you're like, I need more information, get in touch. I have other resources and other avenues for you to go down if you need more information on subject material. Okay, one question came up, have you ever tried writing this type of essay yourself? The answer is yes, I have written rhetorical analysis papers before. I love writing them. They're not my favorites. My favorites are actually more creative style, narrative and descriptive writing, but rhetorical analysis, man, that just leaves so much for an individual interpretation of what's going on. It's so interesting. So I really do love writing rhetorical analysis papers. This particular paper was the brainchild of Dr. Martin, who's the director of composition and writing in the disciplines here at Central. So he came up with the assignment guidelines, and he's been teaching many, many years, much more than my 10 plus years in English, so he really does know what he's doing as far as building this. And as your instructor, of course, I've gone into his general instructions and made it so that it's a little bit more streamlined. So you might see that if you're talking to other people in 101A and they're doing rhetorical analysis, they might be doing it just a little bit differently than we are. Overall, the guidelines are the same. It's so much fun. It's so much fun, guys. I really do get into these, and I really do love reading what you guys come up with. Okay, questions about content. Again, this was a lengthy section of the discussion board, and I will try to go through this as quickly as possible. A lot of the questions dealt with basically how to choose a text. What kind of text is appropriate? How long should the text be? What is the data referenced on the instructions? The data that I'm talking about, that's just what you come up with for your rhetorical analysis. So those are the notes that you take on context, on message, on purpose, on ethos, on pathos, on logos. That's your data set. That's what you're forming or using to form the basis of your paper. Okay, tone should be academic in nature, so word choice should be appropriate as you go through, and the choice of text is largely up to you. I want you to write about something that you find interesting, so that's why I'm not giving you a list of 5 options and saying choose one of these. Okay, so I want you to also show me that you are able to look critically at a text of your choice, and in that regard, sorry, I've got these a little bit out of order here as they come through on the PowerPoint slide. With that in mind, though, I want you to make sure that you're using critical thought as you choose your text. Make sure that it's adequate in scope for your paper. So this means that if you're choosing a movie, don't choose the Titanic, which is like 3.5 hours long. Choose something that's a little bit shorter. If you're choosing a novel, don't choose a novel that's 1,000 pages long. Choose something a little shorter. Usually what works well, TED Talks work really well for this because we've got someone who's presenting an argument, so we can look at it through the lens of rhetoric. YouTube videos, poems, songs, those work really well as far as length and time spent with the analysis aspect. Fiction is usually harder to analyze than nonfiction. So, like I was saying, the Titanic, the movie, that might be more difficult to analyze than a documentary on the Titanic that's pointing the finger at one party or the other. Okay? Hopefully that makes some sense as you're going through. And again, text should be appropriate for an academic setting. So there were a couple of questions on, well, how do you know if this is an appropriate text, if there's content that's questionable? If there's any questionable content and you're worried that the source text that you're using might not be appropriate for the assignment, get in touch. Let me help you vet the source so that we can come to a consensus on whether or not this is something that's applicable or usable for this paper. Okay. All right. A couple other things we're going to be going over. Paragraphing, thesis statements. Again, that's conceptually and organizationally something that we will be talking about in the next week or so to help you as you structure your ideas and put your ideas together in essay form. Okay, and the questions about late work and bonus points for early submission. I don't give bonus points for early submission of papers. I also do have a late work policy. Please see the syllabus for specifics on that and how that applies to your paper. Alright, that's all I have for you to answer these questions. Again, this will be available in this video format, but also as a PDF and as a PowerPoint. So make sure that if you've missed something or if I've gone a bit too fast over any of the content, that you take a minute, download the other resources, and click through. Again, any questions, contact me and I will help as best as I can.